Autoline Daily is brought to you by Bridgestone, passion for excellence.
Here are today's top headlines. Germany tells GM to sell Opel to Magna or else. French auto workers threaten to blow up a plant. And VW reaches a deal on Porsche, or maybe it doesn't. Up next, we'll be back with the news behind the headlines. This is Autoline Daily for Thursday, July 16th, 2009, the 100th anniversary of Audi. Happy birthday, Audi. And now the news. The Wall Street Journal says the German government is threatening not to give aid to Opel unless GM sells part of it to Magna. But with GM coming out of bankruptcy so soon, the Journal says it's now cool to the idea of selling out to a supplier that may allow other automakers access to GM's technology. GM seems more interested in selling to the investment firm RHJ, and here's my analysis why. If and when GM becomes profitable again in the future, it could buy back RHJ's holdings in Opel. But if GM sells part of Opel to Magna or Beijing Auto, it'll never get it back. Speaking of GM, its Vice President of Communications, Steve Harris, one of the most respected PR executives in the industry, will retire in October. He'll be replaced by Chris Pruce, who has been with the automaker for a decade and who will report to Bob Lutz. And while earlier this week we noted that the head of R&D at General Motors, Larry Burns, is retiring, we forgot to mention he'll be replaced by Alan Taub, who's been with GM since 2001. Desperate times call for desperate measures. The Detroit News reports that roughly 200 laid-off French auto workers are demanding that both Renault and PSA pay them 15,000 euros apiece for ruining their lives. If they don't get what they want, they've threatened to blow up the plant located southwest of Paris. They're taking turns guarding 20 canisters of acetylene and butane spread out around the outside of the factory. Reuters reports that Toyota and Mazda are talking about sharing hybrid technology. Mazda wants some of Toyota's core hybrid systems. Both companies declined to comment, but the Nikkei Business Daily reports that a deal between the two automakers is likely to be announced shortly. A Mazda hybrid could go on sale as early as 2013. So why isn't Mazda using Ford's hybrid technology? Good question, and it probably has something to do with the fact Ford sold off half of its holdings in Mazda. The White House has criticized legislation in the U.S. House of Representatives that would prevent GM and Chrysler from closing dealers. According to Reuters, the bill would force GM and Chrysler to reinstate franchise agreements. The House is expected to vote today or tomorrow on it, but if it does pass, the provision faces an uncertain future in the Senate. There were reports earlier today from Germany that Volkswagen reached an agreement with Porsche for a merger to reduce Porsche's debt. But according to Reuters, Porsche is denying those reports. It prefers to cut its debt by issuing new stock and selling a stake of the company to investors in the country of Qatar. Reuters reported yesterday that Porsche's debt has grown past 10 billion euros, about $14 billion, and that came from borrowing money to acquire a majority stake in VW. To commemorate Audi's centennial, coming up next, let's take a look at the last Horch. We'll be back right after this.
Changing tires out here could be dangerous, but with these tires, I don't need to worry.
Bridgestone.
Sometimes car collectors unearth hidden gems. They'll run across an old car rusting away in a field or discover an even rarer treasure buried in a suburban garage. The chances of finding a one-of-a-kind car built by an extinct European manufacturer are slim at best, but not impossible. Texas car collector Al Wilson beat the odds and uncovered an extraordinary automobile that was thought to be lost to history. 4 decades ago, he bought this. Even back then, it was rusty and falling apart, like most of the cars in this auto rancher's herd. Unlike the rest of his collection, though, this is no run-of-the-mill classic. As it turns out, it's the last vehicle ever built by defunct German automaker Horch. Assembled in 1953, it's also a one-off model. So How did it end up in the Lone Star State? Well, an American soldier stationed in Germany purchased it and brought it to the U.S. Eventually, it went up for sale, and Al Wilson had a chance to buy it. He sensed it was something special and paid $500 to save it from getting crushed. Over the years, he contacted museums and historians to try to find out more about the car, but nobody could tell him anything. So it sat in a field with the rest of his collection. Today, the last Horch is home in Germany. His sons eventually figured out what it was and sold it to Audi. Why Audi? Because Horch was one of the 4 original automakers that eventually became Audi as we know it. Today, each brand is represented by a ring in its logo. The company plans on restoring the car to original condition, but not before putting the rundown classic on display in its museum, complete with a diorama of the West Texas prairie. If you want to hear more about this amazing story, jump over to the John's Journal page of our website. We'll have a video that Audi produced posted there a little bit later today. And that's it for today's show, but join us tonight for another edition of Autoline After Hours. We'll go live at 7 p.m. sharp on our website. Joining us this week is Michael Sprague, the head of sales and marketing at Kia, a brand that seems to be almost immune from the sales downturn. And we'll also be announcing the winner of the GM bankruptcy contest, where we asked you to guess how many days GM would be in bankruptcy. And that is it for today's top news in the global automotive industry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight.
Visit our website for even more great content all week long. Autoline Extra, John's Journal, podcasts, and even more. So click over and get the inside view at AutolineDetroit.tv.